The first thing I remember is the scent. Sweet rot beneath ozone. A perfume of dying stars and wet iron that clung to the back of my throat. Then the hum. A constant serrated vibration that pressed into my skull like a living needle. I could not see them yet, but I felt their laughter ripple through the walls of the cell. A laughter without warmth or breath. Just the echo of a cruelty so refined it bordered on artistry. They called it mercy to leave me conscious. I called it worship of pain. And somewhere deep in the thrum of my own heartbeat, I began to understand that survival here meant learning to become less than human, or perhaps something far worse. By the grace of the void and the whisper of the machine spirit, transmit this record to any soul that still listens through the noise of eternity. Let the vox carry my confession where light no longer dares. The hum began long before I understood where I was. It pressed against the bones of my face, a constant resonance that made the teeth ache inside my jaw. I remember the taste of copper flooding my mouth, the tang of it mingling with the faint perfume of ozone and scorched cloth. There was a moment, small, flickering, when I thought I might still be planetside, perhaps beneath the wreck of my chimera, buried in dust and flame. Then I saw the light. It came not from fire, but from a pulsing blue filament that ran along the ceiling like a vein of lightning trapped in glass. The light pulsed in time with the hum, and every beat of it seemed to draw me further away from the world I knew. The first face I saw was not human. It leaned close, long and elegant, as though carved from ivory soaked in night. Its eyes reflected me, distorted, fractured into 1,000 versions of the same terrified man. The creature spoke in a voice that seemed to drag through multiple tones at once, its words like silk drawn across razors. I did not understand its language, but I understood its amusement. It had found something new to break. They stripped us of armor first, then names. Each of us was reduced to sound, the crack of bone, the gasp of lungs. We were soldiers once, proud of the imperial aquila embossed upon our breastplates. Now that sigil meant nothing. Here, the twin-headed eagle was only another pretty shape to be carved into flesh for decoration. The Drukhari, as I later learned to call them, did not kill for conquest. They harvested sensation. They took screams the way we once took breath. I do not know how long I hung there, suspended by hooks that seemed too fine to be metal. They felt alive, pulsing slightly each time I moved. Around me were others. Guardsmen, a mechanicus adept whose augmentations still twitched, a silent sister whose armor had been taken piece by piece. None of us spoke. The Drukhari preferred silence. They wanted the moment of the first cry to be pure, unsullied by conversation or prayer. When they came for me, I tried to call upon the Emperor's light. The words formed in my mind like a reflex, Emperor, protect. But they fell apart the moment I saw the scalpel. It was not a blade as we know it, but a ribbon of refracted energy, a color I cannot name, one that seemed to bend the air around it. The Drukhari artisan, if that word fits, used it with grace. He hummed in rhythm with the walls, as though he too felt the great vibration that held this place together. I remember the sensation of my skin being opened and sealed again before pain even reached my brain. They did not want me dead. They wanted me aware. Time is meaningless in Camera. The lights never dim, and the air carries no cycle of warmth or chill to mark the passing of hours. I only knew change through sound. The hum would rise and fall, and with it so would the laughter. Sometimes it came from the corridors beyond my sight, sometimes from the very walls. Once I heard human voices among it, ragged, hysterical laughter that mimicked theirs. Some of us broke faster than others. Some found solace in madness as though it offered escape from the precision of our tormentors. I began to count the pulses of the hum. At first it was a way to remember I was alive, to impose order upon a world that had none. But over time the pattern shifted. It grew more intricate, developing strange syncopations that my mind tried to follow. It was like listening to a language beneath hearing, a code that spoke not to my reason but to the base of my skull. And as I listened, I began to suspect the hum was not merely background noise. It was alive, or at least connected to something that was. One night, though I use the term loosely, I awoke to find the hooks released. I fell onto a cold surface that shimmered like liquid obsidian. A figure waited nearby, tall and narrow, wearing armor that gleamed like polished beetle shells. I had seen similar forms once in the archives of my regiment's training decks. Dark Eldar warriors, Kabbalite soldiers who served the Archons. But no record had captured the sinuous grace of their movement, the way they seemed to glide rather than walk, as if gravity obeyed them out of fear. He spoke again in that fractured tongue, and though I could not understand it, I recognized the tone, command. I was to follow. Behind him, 2 more of his kind carried rods that pulsed with blue energy, the same hue as the veins in the ceiling. When they struck me with one, I felt every nerve ignite at once, and then clarity. Not pain, not yet, something more precise. The weapon tuned my body to the hum, as if making me resonate with the city itself. I realized in that moment that Kamara was not built. It was grown, a living geometry of impossible design. They marched me through corridors that defied sense. Floors curved into ceilings. Walls breathed faintly. Through transparent panels I saw other captives being dragged, twisted, remade. One had his eyes replaced with crystal insects that still fluttered their wings. Another's spine glowed faintly with runes I did not recognize. Every transformation was an act of art. Every scream was part of the chorus. I tried to remember the sky of my world. Cartus 4, a red dust planet orbiting a dim sun. I tried to picture the faces of my squad mates, the smell of promethium from the chimeras, the voice of our commissar shouting orders through the static. But memory no longer obeyed. Each recollection came laced with echoes of this place. Laughter where there had been silence, hums where there had been prayer. Kamaruk was rewriting me from the inside out. When they brought me before the chamber of glass, I finally understood the purpose of the hum. Beneath the floor lay a pit of light, raw, pulsing energy that twisted in shapes I could not name. The Kabbalite gestured toward it, and though I could not understand his words, I felt the meaning pierce my mind directly. This was the threshold. Those who entered did not return. It was said, I later learned, that the Dark Eldar fed their city with the essence of souls, drawn through suffering and ritual. I was to become one more note in that endless song. I felt the hum rise, a crescendo that shook the chamber. The blue veins in the walls flared to white. My skin crawled as if every atom of me was being measured. Then darkness, not the absence of light, but its devouring. The kind of dark that lives behind the eyes, where even prayer cannot reach. And yet within that void I felt movement. Soft, rhythmic, like a heart. But not mine. The dark had weight, as though poured over me like slag from a manufacturing furnace, and in it the hum sharpened until it etched fine lines behind my eyes. I tried to open them and discovered I already had. The chamber simply refused to admit the idea of light. Shapes announced themselves by pressure rather than sight. The way one feels a storm before it breaks. Something brushed my cheek. Too smooth to be flesh, too warm to be metal, and recoiled with a purr that was not an animal's. I reached for it with the fragment of courage left to me and found only air. Air and the tremble of a living room drawing breath. A whisper flitted through, skittering along the bones of my ears. It was human words broken and resoldered by an alien tongue, a choir singing a hymn they did not believe. I recognized fragments. A field prayer from the Astra Militarum, the cadence drilled into us on parade squares and mud-churned trenches. By the throne and the light of Terra, the voice said, too sweet, too smooth, endure. The word stretched, became a needle, and slid neatly through the membrane of my will. I found myself mouthing it, and the chamber rewarded me with a ripple of pleasure that turned to nausea in the same heartbeat. A hand, gloved in skinned silk, or perhaps something that remembered being silk, cupped my chin and tilted my head. A mask leaned close. It was a face only by courtesy, a lacquered oval pierced with a narrow vox grill and eyes like cut hematite, depthless and bright. The Drukhari murmured, and a translation engine at his throat spat broken low Gothic with theatrical delay. "Do not fear the fall," the machine intoned, mocking the ritual tone of a chaplain. "We will catch every piece of you." The artisan's fingers tightened as if to demonstrate. Then the floor sighed open. I dropped a distance that dislocated my sense of height rather than my limbs, a fall engineered to terrorize the mind without ruining the meat. When I struck the lower platform, it felt like the surface of a slow wave. It accepted me, then pushed me up again, leaving me on my knees before a gallery of shadows. They arranged themselves with deliberate casualness, an audience pretending not to be an audience. I had seen nobles attend a parade once on Cartus IV. Their loathing for the dust could not conceal their hunger for spectacle. The Drukhari were that hunger-given anatomy. A lance of blue arced from somewhere above and licked my shoulder. It was pain, yes, but also instruction. Stand. A second touch added meaning. Turn. I did as commanded, and a murmur passed through the gallery. I understood without words that my obedience was not submission, but a material to be shaped like any other, an ingredient in a recipe whose end state was not death but something far more profitable. "Name?" the Vox Grill demanded lazily. I answered with reflex and remembered too late that names are a kind of surrender. Corporal Jarek Voss, 92nd Cartus Line. The title sounded like a relic pried from a burial pit. A chuckle rippled through the seats, its harmonics sliding along the hum so perfectly that for an instant I mistook it for music. The Drukhari liked the way fear tasted when dipped in pride. They brought another prisoner forward, a tech priest stripped to the waist, his red robes reduced to ribbons around augmetic ports. Tubes hung from his spine like withered vines, each capped with a gem pulsing in quiet counterpoint to the chamber's rhythm. His eyes were gone, replaced by polished plates inscribed with crawling script that my mind refused to focus on. "Designate Magoserant Tassiel," he announced before they could ask, his voice carefully flat. One of the shadows clapped twice, delighted. I tried to reach him with a whisper, some foolish impulse toward solidarity, but the platform flexed to separate us. A grid descended, not bars but thin planes of force that smelled faintly of burned citrus. The Drukhari spoke among themselves with the bright, clipped intonations of aesthetes discussing tools. The translation grill threw up scraps. Resonance pairing. Audience fatigue curve. Weichi's requisition pending. The words arranged themselves into a future I did not want to survive to meet. The artisan in charge stepped forward, and I saw the symbol worked into the gorget at his throat, a stylized mask whose smile was a blade. He wore no trophies obvious to my eye, and that made him worse. He did not need them. His trophies were movements, effects, composure. He gestured, and the platform beneath the Magos Errant exhaled a cloud of shimmering dust. It drifted upward with cruel slowness, settling on augmetic seams and exposed nerve ends with intimate precision. Tassiel did not scream. His hands clenched once, an involuntary benediction to 1,000 machine spirits, and then the dust burrowed. The sound that followed was not a human sound. It was the sound of code catching fire. I wanted to look away, but the hum pinned my gaze. It vibrated through the cavities of my skull and found a frequency that held the eyes open. A puppeteer's thread tied to the muscles at the edge of vision. The Drukhari noticed my compliance and smiled behind their masks, pleased by the depth of